The room was stuffy. The musty air was barely dispersed by a half-dead fan. There was a strong smell of medicines, bleach, stale bed linen, unwashed body, and, as if, death itself. A young nurse, who also worked as a nurse, sat down on a stool by the bed.
Good morning, Nikolai Ivanovich. How are you feeling today?
A completely bald man tried to sit down, but the nurse began to stop him by placing her palm on his chest.
Hush, hush, Nikolai Ivanovich. You don't need to be so abrupt. Take care of your bones.
She put a plate of liquid oatmeal on the bedside table and then took out a cannula from the man's nose, through which oxygen was supplied in a light, barely perceptible trickle.
Let me feed you first and then we'll change your bedding. I heard the doctors talking today. Your case is getting better. Do you hear? Come on, that's it. Like a little one with a spoon.
Nikolai Ivanovich looked like a starved, emaciated and exhausted bald old man. But in fact he was only 38 years old. He tried to open his mouth, but not to take a spoonful of porridge with his lips. He wheezed and said in a barely audible whisper,
"And where was the neighbor removed from the ward?"
The words were given with incredible difficulty. The patient began to suffocate, trying convulsively to grab the cannula lying on the pillow with his hand. The nurse helped him.
You can't talk. You need to save your strength. And in order to have strength, you need to eat.
She tried to speak cheerfully, but she had only recently arrived at this position and therefore could barely contain her virtuous pity. She was very worried. Lately she began to notice that it was getting harder and harder for her. Other nurses advised her not to let anything pass through her, to fence her heart and try not to think about the patients. Life is life, and unfortunately, people get sick. Some suffer very much before they die. Nikolai looked into her eyes, and there was only one thing in his gaze. The nurse put the spoon back into the patient's mouth.
I don't know for sure, but I heard that some clinic made a request for him. They seem to treat serious tumors there. I don't even know. Maybe he will be cured.
The man began to slowly turn his face to the wall. By this, he made it clear that he would not eat. This is the third refusal in the last 2 days. The girl realized that she had said something unnecessary and immediately tried to correct the situation.
Although, it's not accurate. Maybe I'm confusing something. I told you that I had heard about your affairs, that everything would improve soon. Well, maybe at least eat a spoonful with your course of treatment.
The man was silent. All seriously ill people in this hospice had one feature that developed gradually, especially for those who are about to stubbornness, heavy and unbearable. The nurses were crazy about it, but continued to perform their duties. Nikolai turned to the wall, making it clear that the conversation was over. The girl sighed, her heart ached with pity and tears welled up in her eyes. She got up and went to the window, stealthily crossed herself and silently asked God and all the saints to ease the fate of all seriously ill people. The girl's gaze ran through a small hospital park and then to the entrance of the hospital where patients in urgent conditions were usually taken. There she saw the head doctor, who himself was rolling out a medical gurney onto the street, trying to do it smoothly, but still the bed skidded a little to the left. She was stopped from tipping over by a tall man dressed in a sports jacket and sweatpants. He also helped her roll the gurney to a large van with a red cross on the side. The girl watched and was a little surprised to herself.
I wonder which clinic has such cars. Probably at the regional center. And on the cot?
The girl narrowed her eyes. Nikolai's neighbor was lying on the bed. A very young guy. It seems no older than 20 years old. The disease progressed rapidly and metastasized to the liver, kidneys, and gastrointestinal tract. So far, only the brain remained intact. The girl also surreptitiously crossed the sick guy on the bed, and then turned and looked at Nikolai. He was still turning away to the wall. It seemed to the girl that he was crying. But what could she do? Absolutely nothing but feeling sorry for him. She felt a little strange being in this room with a man facing the wall, holding a plate of semolina porridge in her hand. At the same time, the head doctor was silently helping to unload the patient into the van. As a doctor, he wanted to ensure the viability of the patient, but as it turned out, there were already 2 doctors and a nurse inside the van who picked up the patient and immediately transferred him to a special module that only vaguely resembled a medical bed. The doctor looked around with the intention of examining the van from the inside a little, but he was not allowed to look around in more detail. A man in a sports jacket was standing nearby. "Viktor Andreevich, thank you for your help. Go to the exit, please." The man behaved very correctly, one might even say with exaggerated politeness. He put his hand on the doctor's shoulder. The touch was firm, determined, and unyielding. The doctor turned to the exit of the van and went outside, the man following him. At the exit, the doctor heard a fragment of a phrase uttered by one of the medical staff inside the van. "Connect to the ADF module." And then, "Rot! We can't take it! Artificial coma! Put him on Veronal! Turn off the brain!" The doctor wanted to look back, but they didn't let him do it. The man in the sports jacket simply said, "Look in front of you." There was a habit of saying it in this phrase, and so that the phrase was heard and executed. The doctor was 45 years old. He was a strong man. At least he considered himself a strong, confident, and accomplished man. But this phrase shook his self-confidence. The doctor got out of the van and walked to the entrance to the clinic's reception entrance. "Viktor Andreevich, please stop." The man became polite again. His tone changed. "We need to talk." The doctor turned around. "Yes, I'm listening to you." He was surprised. The van was already closed. Very strangely, he did not hear the sound of the rear doors closing at all. A man in a sports jacket approached the doctor. The van started up and began to drive slowly along the paved path to the central gate. "I would like to ask you to keep the transfer of your patient a secret. We will settle all issues with his family, or rather we have already settled them on our own. And you personally?" The man smiled faintly and reached into his inner pocket. The doctor's heart skipped a beat. But contrary to terrible expectations, a hefty wad of money appeared almost in the face of the doctor. "This is your small reward. Goodbye." The man turned and walked to the exit, where the van had disappeared just a few minutes ago. The doctor held a wad of money in his hands and blinked in surprise. 24 hours ago, he would not have believed in such a story if an outsider had told about it. But now, he was experiencing an amazing thing himself. By the way, just a day ago, he received a call from the Ministry of Health itself and was told to email digitized personal cards of patients, and not any, but hopeless ones with advanced bone sarcoma at the last stage. A few hours later, the phone rang again in the office. "Hello, Alexei Dmitrievich. We have contacted you about the patient cards. We are interested in one very specific one. Prepare for his transfer to a special medical and wellness center." The doctor cleared his throat and began to quickly search for the necessary file in the open laptop lying on the table. "Now, just a second." He clicked on the desired file. "If I'm not mistaken, are you interested in Kuznetsov Pyotr Semyonovich, born in 1997? "Yes, that's him. You know, it's a very curious case. Multiple metastases, almost fatal lesions, but the brain continues to live. And you didn't give him chemo and radiation therapy." The doctor frowned. "Well, now someone unknown will begin to teach him medical practice." "No, they didn't. It was considered inappropriate. The patient had previously been treated with drugs, but the cancer progressed rapidly. They were transferred to a course of anesthesia and palliative care in a hospice at our clinic. You did everything right. I'll tell you a secret. This patient has a chance. You know, a very unique case. Of course, I would ask you not to talk about it. The research is secret. Do you understand?" The last word was pronounced with emphasis. "Of course I understand. Should I liquidate the card?" "Yes, but after we pick up the patient, a special transport will arrive for him tomorrow. You will be notified." The doctor hung up and was very surprised. I checked the number on the automatic caller ID. They called directly from the Ministry of Health. These calls were rare, but they were still there. Most of the issues of medical realities were solved, but now something new has happened. After the patient was moved, so to speak, the doctor returned to his office and first of all destroyed the patient's file, then checked whether the card was displayed in any adjacent files. He called the registry office and ordered them to bring him a paper patient's card. He intended to simply burn it. There were 2 nurses caring for the patient. One was still a young girl. He would tell her that the patient had been transferred to a specialized center, wink, be kinder, and she would forget, and he would persuade the second nurse to keep quiet tonight, at home, and he would not have to persuade for a long time. After destroying the card, he opened the browser. The doctor was plagued by questions, and most importantly, the idea of what an APD module is. He repeated the APD to himself several times. APD, what is it? First, he typed the abbreviation into the search engine and saw many options from the automatic sensor in the printer to the pressure support unit. After scrolling through more than 100 options, he saw a phrase that interested him somewhat in the context of his specialty. Automatic life support. The module of automatic life support. The doctor clicked on the link, the page took a long time to load, and then an inscription appeared in the white field of the browser. The page is blocked. He tried to reload the page, but the result remained the same. All this intrigued, but somewhere on the borders of interest. Fear also grew, at first slightly tingling and then covering with a quick, literally instantaneous wave, at the same moment letting go. The doctor ruled out, absolutely completely ruled out options with illegal transplantation. All the patient's organs were irreversibly affected, a total deficiency of hormones, enzymes, and trace elements. Amazingly, the only intact organ was the brain. The brain? Did they really need his brain? However, the doctor waved his hand in anger. It's a phenomenon, and the phenomenon needs to be studied. There was a wad of money in the pocket of the white coat, which the doctor did not have time to examine properly. His confusion could be understood. They take the patient God knows where, ask him to destroy information about him, and ask him in such a way that it is difficult to refuse. Then they also hand over a pack of banknotes. He felt for it in his pocket and took it out. Wow, dollars, and no less than 10,000. Having felt such a sum, which drew in the mind of the doctor quite definite fantasies related to pleasure, he carefully checked the files once again, analyzed the whole situation. At first, I thought that I would need to give the young, compassionate nurse a little money, but after thinking about it for a few more minutes, I rejected this idea. Kuznetsov Pyotr Semyonovich, born in 1997, was practically unaware of himself. Constant hellish pains, which were somewhat dulled by painkillers, launched a process unknown to him in the brain. The brain simply disconnected the body from itself, fueled by who knows what. In a constant dream, the patient saw hallucinations that already seemed to him to be the afterlife. There was even a distant feeling of happiness. The pain had stopped. It was calm and bright. Now consciousness began to return little by little, pouring into the body with a lingering pain from the back of the head to the tips of the toes. The sarcoma began to gnaw at the body from the left thigh, almost completely knocking out calcium and destroying bone, and then sprouted into organs and other bones. The fate of the patient was predetermined. He heard voices above him, seeing no faces, nothing but darkness. The automatic life support module guarantees the preservation of the test subject by 70%. The result is good. Last time it was 42% and they delivered it, but I advise you to hurry up. Is the exoskeleton ready? Someone answered. Yes. We proceed to the opening of the soft tissues. Something buzzed and touched the skin. Peter felt no pain, but only pressure on his shins, some kind of deepening, and then his body rhythmically pulled forward and back. I wanted to resist somehow. To resist, but it was impossible. The body did not obey, and with the pain, the opportunity to move at least somehow at that minimum level, which was still preserved despite a serious defeat, was gone. The buzzing stopped. Implement the exoskeleton and activate the motion control system. I'm getting started. Can we postpone checking the control system before landing at the airfield? I'm afraid of uncalculated accidents. The patient's brain activity has been preserved. I would not be surprised if he hears us and is aware of what is happening. No, we have to carry out a check before transferring the cadaver to the laboratory. Peter lay there, unable to move. The word cadaver was vaguely familiar to him. A cadaver, a centaur. That's right, I remember. A cadaver is a lifeless body, just a corpse. Peter thought abstractedly. Everything is very clear. He died. He suffered. Cancer finally finished him off. It didn't even seem scary, or at least weird. He got sick, quickly fell ill, went to the hospital, and then to die in a hospice. That's it, the song is sung. However, the reality around him continued to exist. Moreover, it interacted with him. There was a distant sound again, something drowning out the voice, some kind of all-encompassing monotonous hum. Treat the spine in the area of the 8th and 9th vertebrae. We're on time. Then peel the first and second rows of ribs symmetrically. We need a cavity for the placement of a portable life support machine. I'm getting started. Peter was turned on his side. Again, the close buzzing, pressure, and feeling of penetration. The man felt like a skin, someone's clothes, or a cover that they were trying to pull on some kind of structure. The preparation is completed. We can start testing. Inject a nerve paralyzer. After the injection, Peter stopped being aware of the events around him, but the procedures carried out on his body did not stop. However, the body itself has undergone significant changes. The bones of the arms, legs, and spine have been reinforced with metal structures attached to pins and screws. From the outside, the body seemed to be a hybrid of a metal robot and a living human, a cyborg. The only thing left untouched is the head. 2 engineers entered the fenced-off laboratory room right in the belly of a huge transport plane, rolling out cables from 2 coils. The cables were connected to ports in the exoskeleton that had mutilated Peter's body. One of the engineers was holding a laptop in his hands, and the second was finishing preparations near the body. Doctors, as usual, they probably have an atrophied sense of disgust. God, it stinks. Following the protocol, the engineer wore a protective white mask on his face, but it was difficult to breathe in it. Besides, he didn't really enjoy such long flights. Therefore, the mask was lowered below the nose, but now he put it back in place again. The mask muffled the bad smell spreading around. Okay, let's do our thing. The flight will last another 5 hours. Have you connected the control system to the console? Yes. Let's start checking. Activation of muscle functions in conjunction with the biomechanism of the exoskeleton. After a few minutes, when the basic parameters and functions were configured, Peter, or rather his body, began to move like a puppet, obeying other people's commands. He moved his arms and legs, but did not understand it. His mind was turned off by a neuroparalyzer. After engineering tests of the contact interaction of a living body and a bioexoskeleton, a military man in uniform entered the room. He was extremely short, which gave rise to a considerable amount of complexes and dissatisfaction with himself in his soul. He tried his best to prove his importance, his involvement in something great, hence the desire to control and guide the children. Yeah, a creature. A natural creature. Have you checked it in motion? What can he do? The engineers looked at each other and one of them grinned. He can only do what we demand from him through the control system. He is completely controlled and deprived of the ability to think independently. The officer stared at the body on the preparation table in fascination. Frankenstein? All right, get him ready for transportation. Is the carrying module ready? One of the engineers nodded. Yes, we need the help of 2 people and a portable electric bucket. The weight of the model is about 300 kilograms. The soldier took out a walkie-talkie and called 2 soldiers from the guard. They came immediately, ready to carry out the order. The officer looked up at them. You are placed at the disposal of these 2 gentlemen. The officer looked around. Why is there such a stench here? His gaze dropped to the brown puddle under the preparation table, and he grimaced. The junior engineer, who grinned at the officer's question at the beginning of the conversation, smiled again cheekily and a little arrogantly. Do you think I said something funny? The engineer stopped smiling and was silent. I'm asking, did you find something funny? The engineer did not know how to respond or how to diffuse the situation. I'm sorry, Mr. Gwinski, it's just stressful. It's not quite the usual thing, you know. The officer looked straight into his eyes. Lights were flashing in his gaze. I advise you to consider your actions in my presence. This is my first and last advice to you. Is that clear? The engineer was silent again. Is that clear? Yes, I see. This time, both tall soldiers who came on the officer's orders grinned, and the military man himself left the room pleased with himself. John Wojtowicz was walking along a concrete path. This time I had to go myself to check how the special selection and training is carried out. The sun was blazing fiercely. John ran a hand through his hair and walked forward to the rounded laboratory building, which looked more like a concrete dome from the outside. Are you coming or not? John turned around. His assistant and bodyguard, Stephen Summers, bent down and tied his shoelace. I'm coming! It's hot today! Wojtowicz nodded. Yes, there is something. You need to stop wearing a uniform and you need to change your jeans. I don't understand at all. How do you walk in it? Summers straightened up and, smiling, opened the hem of his jeans. My clothes are my weapons. A sheath for throwing knives and a pistol holster were sewn on the inner surface under the jeans. In addition, there were 2 paired holsters on a brown leather belt. Wojtowicz chuckled. If you had your way, you would have rolled a tank here. Summers silently looked into Wojtowicz's eyes, and he was surprised. What? Do we have a tank at the base? Well, you're crazy. All right, let's go. 15 minutes later, Wojtowicz and Summers descended to the lower underground level, where a medical center was set up for the training of experimental subjects, and in addition for the treatment of injured and injured employees, or more simply militants involved in military actions. Oh, the doctors are getting high here. It's so cool, you could even say it's cold. But John, yes, we need to get to section 12B. Let's go faster. The doctor in section 12B went from bed to bed and wrung his hands, periodically arguing with his deputy. There were a lot of patients lying on wide beds along the wall under life support devices. Wojtowicz entered and immediately turned his attention to the doctor. He was standing by the bed on which a thin, bald woman was lying in an unnatural position and was marking something in a special magazine, sometimes turning to the deputy. The selection was disgusting. We spent so much money and time. What is this anyway? The doctor pointed his finger at the next bed, on which lay a naked, thin old woman who looked more like a mummy. She showed no signs of life. The doctor took her hand and tried to feel her pulse. She's dead. The doctor went to the next bed and sighed again in resignation. I asked you to control the selection. Of all the test subjects, no one is good. Who will be responsible for all this? Serious experiments are being disrupted. Besides, we are limited in time. We are running out of time. The deputy was silent. The doctor began to get angry. Not only did it all look like an outright criminal adventure, although well paid, but there were also some morons around who could not organize anything. It is unknown how their conversation would have ended if Wojtowicz had not approached them. He greeted me briefly and then asked the doctor about a private conversation. Of course, let's go to my office, I beg. The doctor led Wojtowicz into the corridor, where the office of the doctor in charge of research was equipped, as well as the premises of additional laboratories. Summers followed. How many subjects do you have at this point in time? The doctor entered the office and went to his desk. Everything had not gone according to plan in the morning, and he wanted to sit down, but Summers held him by the shoulder. Shh! Take your time. Wojtowicz went inside and sat down at the doctor's desk himself. So how many subjects are there now, doctor? The doctor remained standing. 17 subjects, all in different stages of the disease, but everything is in severe course, almost to death. 2 are considered promising, and more. Wojtowicz interrupted the doctor. It's all fine, but you will have to eliminate everyone, and get ready to receive 1 subject, who will be placed in the main laboratory. But how? Who's going to do all this? I mean liquidation. How much time do we have? Wojtowicz looked coldly into the doctor's eyes. You have 4 hours. Proceed immediately. I will request people from related services for you. Your task is to ensure disposal and prepare a laboratory to accommodate the subject. Here, check it out. Wojtowicz nodded to Summers, who handed the doctor a folder with documents. I advise you to hurry up. Wojtowicz got up from the table and headed for the exit. Summers followed. And John, I think the doctor is going to start fussing now and may make mistakes. I'll stay here and check it out. Wojtowicz shook his head. No, I'll need you soon. To cope and do everything as needed is in the interest of the doctor, or he will go after those who will be prepared for liquidation. Summers took a cigarette out of his pocket and lit it right next to the elevator. I don't like this, John. Wojtowicz entered the elevator. Me too, but someone has to do it all. The elevator went up. Summers was smoking, but the internal ventilation system was perfectly purifying the air. Wojtowicz also took out a cigar and took it out of its metal case, thoughtfully twirled it in his hands, but changed his mind about lighting it. Put it back. What about the latest observations of the smart guy? Summers blew smoke through his nose. That's fine. Shows absolute loyalty. After the time when our friend Elon Musk screwed up, we held a series of events, once again proving to him that he is not an independent figure. Currently, he is actively working on a program for replicating a biological computer into a living body. Vojtovich took out a cigar anyway. Everything should be over in a few hours. The body is already on its way here, as I was informed. A perfect sample. They were tracked in Russia. They are delivered here almost officially from the airfield in Ulyanovsk. They complete their preparations along the way. Does it take a long preparation or what? Vojtovich was not strong in medical terms and aspects, but over the years of service in the Special Directorate of Research and Secret Operations, he mastered some terms. I understood that a drug with a completely destroyed body is needed, but at the same time in order to preserve the brain. Cancer patients with bone sarcoma were selected. Why? I don't know for sure, but it's related to calcium. We need an organism with a minimum content, with calcium knocked out of the bones. The metabolism of the biocomputer either does not tolerate it or something else. Summers threw his cigarette into a small ashtray on a high pedestal right in the elevator. And why not prepare the subject separately, so as not to search? But where is it? In Russia. The elevator stopped. How do I know? I didn't invent this thing, the biocomputer and the fucking aliens. This is an unusual form of life for us. You need to do everything carefully and painstakingly. If the biocomputer dies during the experiment, then we will all be sent to the next world. Summers laughed. Not us, but you. Men like me are needed in any situation, and I was not responsible for anything. Vojtovich patted his bodyguard condescendingly on the shoulder. Don't worry, Steve. If they send me under an excavator, then I won't forget about you either. Both men laughed as they left the laboratory building. After the underground coolness, the heat seemed unbearable at all. The doctor, who is the head of the laboratory, which he privately called the Dungeon of Horror, saw in his office and studied the documents left by Summers. The folder contained mostly photographs, which were accompanied by a single form with sample parameters, mainly in sizes for placement. Everything else had to be provided by the teams of accompanying doctors and engineers. He was holding a photograph that depicted something grotesque and unimaginable, a monster of flesh and metal that had once been just a man. Metal staples and rods held the flesh, which had been cut and sewn in a not very good way, legs, arms, abdominal cavity, in which apparently something was pulsating. The photos didn't convey movement, but it felt like a hunch. The body itself was mounted on a horizontal retaining frame, located at an angle, and was fixed with electromagnetic locks on wide metal tapes. The doctor thought about what he saw. Well, they want to plant the neurons of a biocomputer, or simply put an alien brain into the human brain, multiply them, and using the human essence, what is commonly called the soul, subdue them. But why do they need a body on an exoskeleton? And my mind immediately prompted me. They want to create a prototype of a controlled weapon, a living weapon equipped with a super brain. It all looked like a fantasy novel written by a crazy author whose head is full of thoughts about world domination, big wars, a supernation that has subjugated the whole world to its will. Is this really going to happen in our country? Now it is clear why the military is engaged in the whole project. They control everything and stick their noses everywhere. Putting down the documents, he ran out to the laboratory, and after 10 minutes it already looked like an anthill. Beds with life support systems for 6 subjects were dismantled, and the patients themselves were stacked on the floor. The crematorium was already ready for them. At the same time, no one was really interested in who was alive and who had given their soul to God. The biomechanical organism was installed in a horizontal position directly in the transport frame. Scientists were no longer interested in the body, they needed to deal with the brain, ensuring the further conduct of the experiment. 3 surgeons worked on the brain at the same time, the best of the best in the USA and perhaps in the whole world. It's funny, but one of them was a Russian immigrant who moved to the United States in the 90s, the other 2 were Chinese who were already born under the Star-Spangled Flag. Fang, proceed to the craniotomy. Open the skull in the area of the cerebellum. And you, Mr. Liuji, take care of the maintenance of synoptic communications. We need minimal signaling. The Russian surgeon stood between them and waited. Fang worked with a circular saw, opening the exposed cranial bone. The saw went easily and almost fell through, chipping out large pieces of bone. Bone tissue is severely depleted. Possible destruction. It's okay. We'll replace it with a plate. Continue the autopsy. After a few minutes, the bone was removed and a coloring plate slightly smaller than a child's palm was placed on a metal table. The integuments of the brain membrane are clean. I'm starting to remove the shell. Now the moment has come when it's time for the primary surgeon to act. The two Chinese stepped aside. A long needle was inserted between the lobes of the brain, with which the intermediate membrane between the left and right lobes was dissected. A banal lobotomy was performed. But after that, the surgeon took a small sealed flask from the table and injected a syringe into it, selected a purple-blue liquid. I'm starting to inject foreign neurons. 1.5 cubes with about 19,000 neurons were introduced. Further monitoring on the monitor. Bring up the microscope. One of the Chinese rolled an electronic digital microscope equipped with the ability to record and monitor in real time to the operating table. One of the surgeons stayed at the microscope, which was a 2-meter installation with a huge eyepiece and a control console, while the other two stood at the observation monitor. Mark the time. The introduced neurons interact with the neurons of the subject's brain, the membrane walls are strengthened, and new synaptic connections are formed. The interaction is completed. One of the Chinese lowered his mask. So fast, just 2.5 seconds, a little more. Yes, preliminary tests on primates have shown almost the same effect, but it's more about subordination than interaction. Mr. Liu Ji, how long will the effect of the psychoparalyzer last? About half an hour. To be more precise, 29 minutes. The effect will gradually weaken. I see. During this time, we will have time to put a plate on the open brain. Subsequently, the entire skull will be replaced with a titanium shell. In addition, it is necessary to replace the vocal cords with a laryngophone in order for the subject to reproduce verbal speech. Let's get started. There was a sharp knock on Wojtowicz's office, and then they just burst in. It was Summers. "John, we have an emergency. Code red. Units have been alerted." Before that, Wojtowicz was already sitting on heartburn and thinking about what could happen, what could go wrong. And suddenly Summers bursts in. How? Where did he make a mistake? And what exactly is the matter? Trying to remain calm, he asked. Summers took out his pistol and pulled the bolt. That thing broke loose from its chains. The surgical team that performed the neuron transplantation is dead. I saw on the camera. There's a mess. This thing broke out of the locks and knocked out the doors. Now it has been blocked at the sea level. It is locked in the passage where the doors are sealed automatically when an alarm is triggered. Wojtowicz jumped up. What? Give the command to all units not to approach the C block. This creature can control thoughts. Summers snatched out his walkie-talkie and began to access the channels of the unit commanders. Suddenly, there was a crackle of automatic weapons from the street, an explosion, and again, wild automatic gunfire. Your mother! Wojtowicz, crouching at the windowsill, looked out of the window. His office was located on the 4th floor of a 5-story administrative building, and the entire area of the complex was at a glance. What Wojtowicz saw horrified him. 2 soldiers were moving from the checkpoint with a ridiculous broken gate. Someone was running out of the laboratory, and they were shooting at each other. There was a natural battle with the wounded and the dead. We didn't have time. Summers, take a position by the window. No, help me first. Wojtowicz grabbed the chiffonier and tried to move it away from the wall. Moved it slightly. Summers understood everything and ran up to the commander. Together they moved the chiffonier to the door and brought it down, barricading the entrance. It won't keep them long, but at least it's something. Take a position by the window, try not to let them near the entrance. Now Wojtowicz ran past the window and a stray bullet wounded him in the shoulder. He fell from the blow and instinctively pressed his palm to his shoulder. Summers wanted to help him. Stand down, hold your position. Wojtowicz crawled to the table and picked up the phone. He wasn't working anymore. Hey Summers, throw me the radio. Wojtowicz seemed oblivious to the pain and blood flowing down his arm from the wound. He felt that the bullet had gone through. With his good hand, he picked up the walkie-talkie and scrolled through the channel. Chicks, get in touch. Chicks! It sounded clear from the radio.
Yes, Chicks is in touch. What's going on there?
Chicks, don't ask too many questions. Raise the Marines, block the center, destroy everyone who has a weapon in their hands. I guarantee the security of the implementation. Do it when you're ready. Wojtowicz put down his walkie-talkie and took out a small remote control from his desk. Without thinking, he pressed the button. Die, bitch. An hour later, 3 Marines and their commander Chicks entered Wojtowicz's office. He gave a military salute.
Sabaro, get the doctor here now.
Wojtowicz was holding a pistol with his good hand and Summers was lying next to him, wounded in the chest and bandaged with Wojtowicz's shirt.
Commander, I see it was hot in here.
Wojtowicz forced a smile. What took you so long, Chicks?
Your fighters fought like hell. What happened here, John?
Wojtowicz laughed. He always laughed after hot fire contacts and victories. Unsuccessful experiments with alien intelligence. The creature has subjugated their brains, turning people into cans of shit. Chick smiled too.
The doctor will come now. They will help you. What are your orders?
Unlock level C and burn it out with a flamethrower. Hurry up. Wojtowicz knew that instead of a bioorganism whose brain was poisoned by the neurons of an alien creature, there was a pile of metal and flesh lying in a closed corridor. He blew it up himself. Wojtowicz suspected that all this might not end well and ordered, even during transportation by plane from Russia, to stuff a hefty portion of explosives into the creature's body with the possibility of remote detonation. And he was right. In the evening, Elon Musk independently called Wojtowicz. He reported every 5 hours, including at night, but this call was off the plan. Wojtowicz received first aid and refused to be hospitalized. Summers was taken away immediately. The injury turned out to be very serious. Elon Musk began the conversation ingratiatingly. Mr. Wojtowicz, I can't understand what's going on. Yesterday, the biocomputer collaborated with us, but today it refused to do simple analytical work. Not that he refused, but simply did not get in touch with us. It was as if he had fallen asleep. Wojtowicz listened and was silent. Now we are trying to resuscitate him. He's alive, fully active, but he's not making contact. In addition, I think I understood why the biocomputer forbade us to explore the relict alien ship in South Africa. New data has been received from the expedition group. It looks like we can get another biocomputer at our disposal. If you're interested, I can prepare a full report by tomorrow morning. Okay, do not carry out any work with the biocomputer. It becomes dangerous. Our research has gone the wrong way. I'll figure out what to do next. Do you understand? I repeat, no work or research should be carried out. Elon Musk hung up the phone without saying anything. He probably had his own thoughts on the matter.